He owned his own shop and sold equipment that was all handmade. One day, he was fortunate enough to start selling everything he produced to the kingdom of Cairo. Amidst the endless war, that was the perfect opportunity for him to elevate his status. With the end of the conflict, the same blacksmith was granted the title of Baron. And this man is the owner of these lands and the father of the young master Romain, who is the protagonist of this story. We see an old man telling this story to his seated boy. Meanwhile, a mustached man standing behind them wonders why the boy is paying so much attention to something that everyone already knows. However, the story then takes us back a few hours. The young man asks if he is the eldest son of the Dimitry family, if they are in the kingdom of Kiro on the Salamander continent, and if the marine world really doesn't exist. The mustached man affirms this while thinking that the young man has always been odd, but today he really seems out of his mind. Perhaps he's been using some of those strange drugs that have become popular among the rich these days. The mustached man then mentions that a young lady from the Lawrence family is coming to visit them, but as he says this, he reflects on how the young man has been wasting his life over the past 25 years. That's why he's known as the Dimitry family's trash. The man tries to explain the importance and values of the girl, but Dimitry interrupts him, saying there's something more important. He asks for the oldest person in these lands to be brought to him, someone much more important than this young lady, because he needs to learn how to live in this current world. The mustached man is confused as to why a 25-year-old would say something like that, but as a servant, all he can do is obey. The story then returns to the present. The old man says that's all he knows about these places. Dimitry thanks him and says he will give him a reward, but the old man simply responds that it was an honor to speak with the young master. Now Dimitry knows that everyone knows him as Roman Dimitry. However, his true name is Baek Joong-Hyuk. He's a person from the Miram world who lived a life of wars, conquered everything he wanted, and died in peace at the end. But for some strange reason, he woke up in his body. He doesn't know if this is the will of the heavens or a punishment for not accepting ascension. Suddenly, they hear a noise outside, and someone yells for a bastard. The boy gets kicked in the face while everyone watches. Surrounded by thugs in front of the small shop, he bleeds and can't respond, while the men keep calling him a filthy bastard and continue to beat him mercilessly. Dimitri's servant approaches to take a look, but is immediately shocked. He recognizes that red fang tattoo all too well. Beside him, someone asks what's going on. Dimitry orders him to answer quickly. The servant explains that these are the Blood Fangs, a group known not only in Dimitri's territory, but also in the nearby regions. It seems the boy on the ground owes them something. The servant tries to tell Dimitry not to get involved because it will only cause trouble. However, the young man has already disappeared from his side and orders the thugs to stop. As Dimitry calmly approaches, the servant desperately tells him not to do anything. But Dimitry continues to walk forward. A bald man appears, recognizes Dimitry, and laughs in his face, warning him to stay out of it and not to think he has any authority just because he's of noble birth. Everyone says it's better if he doesn't interfere because it's none of his business. The servant continues to insist that they won't gain anything by going against the Blood Fangs. But Dimitry simply calls for Hans. He doesn't know the rules of this place, so he wants an explanation. Who broke the rules of this land and who should be punished? Hans hesitates for a moment, swallowing hard with fear before speaking. He says that if the boy really is in debt and didn't pay, he is guilty. However, the Blood Fangs don't have permission to punish someone like this. Or still, they disrespected the eldest son of the Dimitry family, which in itself is a crime punishable by death. According to the rules of this place, it wouldn't be strange if they were executed for this. The thugs just stare, while Hans wonders if he should have said that. Dimitry then asks if they heard the explanation. He picks up a stick from the ground and declares that as the eldest son of the Dimitry family, he will have to punish them all. The bald man tries to explain that Dimitry is a noble and doesn't understand how the world works. He tells him to look at their shoulder tattoos and warns that if he continues acting like this, everyone will be in a difficult situation. Dimitry only says that this proves what you wanted to know. The bald man, now confident, asks what Dimitry is talking about. The young man explains that from what he can tell, they are nothing but trash, since they speak this way about the lord of this land. He advances, saying that he doesn't care about the reputation they have in this place. The thugs are taken aback because they didn't expect the boy to actually attack like that. But now you will have to defend the honor of the Blood Fangs. He slashes into Dimitri's neck. However, he immediately feels something strange. Dimitry had already plunged that branch into him. Without hesitation, Dimitry pulls it out and turns toward the other two thugs, but they only curse him, calling him a bastard and vowing to take revenge for their leader. Hans warns Dimitry to be careful, pointing out that the thugs are far better armed than he is. Yet Dimitry easily dodges their attack. He lands a swift kick to one thug's shin and follows it up with a punch to the face. The servant is bewildered. He had no idea that the young master could fight like this. To him, it doesn't even make sense that this could be the same Master Roman. The first thing Baek saw when he opened his eyes was a farewell letter on the floor and scattered drugs. The kingdom of Kiro, always at war, had to choose a representative from each of its noble houses to serve in the army. Roman was chosen to be his family's representative. However, he chose to take his own life instead. Baek reflects that it was a pathetic life, regardless of what Roman went through. But the current owner of this body is the leader of the celestial demon sect, and now he will live as he pleases. And boy, with just a stick, he painted the entire town red. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to censor this part because the boy is just too cruel. Behind him, someone calls him a monster. One of the last remaining blood fangs tries to flee, but Dimitry grabs him by the hair, slams him to the ground, and declares that the law must be obeyed. He warns that this last one will be allowed to live as a warning of what happens when the law is disobeyed. He gathers everyone in the town and declares that his name is Roman Dimitry. If anyone disagrees with the punishment he has dealt to these people, they can come find him at any time. Baek Joong-Hyuk. He reached the pinnacle of the Miram world with incomparable strength. Hundreds of thousands of martial artists were defeated and massacred by him. When the blood of his enemies formed a river, everyone recognized that the celestial demon sect controlled the Miram world. But now, in this moment, he has to exert himself just to deal with street rats. He calls for Hans and instructs him to notify the guards about everything that happened and to have someone clean up the place. The servant simply replies that he will do it immediately and runs off. Dimitry reflects on how weak and useless this body he inhabits is. He needs to accelerate his efforts to gather information on how to strengthen himself. Just then, the boy he had saved earlier gets up and thanks him for saving his life. Dimitry remembers that this was the boy who was being beaten, but tells him that what he did was not intended to help him. The Blood Fangs broke the law and were punished, and that's all. Now the boy will have to explain his situation if he wants to keep his tongue. The poor boy, having just tried to express his gratitude, receives a threat instead. However, he says he will explain. His relatives borrowed money from the Blood Fangs to complete the purchase of some land and start farming. They would have easily been able to repay the amount they borrowed by selling their crops. But the damn Blood Fangs went to the land and destroyed all the crops so that they couldn't pay back the debt. Only later did the boy discover that they did this to blackmail his family and take his younger sister. The boy screams that the world isn't fair because even though they didn't have much, they never harmed anyone. The only thing he begs for is for Dimitry to save his sister. But Baek just observes the boy's eyes. That look reminds him of the mad demon, one of the 4 superior kings and someone he also met in a place as wretched as this. He then asks the boy his name, to which he replies, Kevin. With that, Roman says he will look into the situation and take care of everything. The boy shouts his thanks, while Dimitry senses that he will have a long relationship with this boy. The scene shifts to a carriage approaching. Someone inside informs Miss Flora that they are nearing the Dimitry estate. The blonde sighs, saying she understands. It seems she will have to meet this Roman Dimitry. A month earlier, someone shouted in a castle, demanding to know why there is an arranged marriage with the Dimitry family. Her father tries to remind her that their lands have been in terrible condition due to the ongoing war. However, Flora is confused, questioning whether the marriage was decided this way, and worst of all, it's with the Dimitrys, a family full of old miners and a bunch of blacksmiths. She tries to explain something, but her father interrupts, saying all he can do is apologize for being so pathetic. Back in the present, the man in the carriage announces that they've arrived. Flora had hoped that at least the marriage would be with the second son, who seemed to have a promising future. But even that was ruined because Roman himself begged his father for her hand in marriage. She knows very well the reputation this man has for living a life of luxury and pleasure, and now she doesn't understand why they drenched him in so much perfume. As she walks through the corridors, she thinks that no matter how much her father needs this, she won't accept it, and she needs to make that clear. At that moment, she turns to Dimitry and says she wants him to forget about this marriage. Immediately, he replies that it's indeed a great idea. At this point, the poor girl is utterly confused. Dimitry explains that he thought better about this marriage and realized it's foolish for someone as amazing as her to marry the idiot of the Dimitry family. Flora is left bewildered, wondering if he's being serious. He then tells her that something very important has come up and he needs to speak with his father immediately. However, she stops him, asking what's going on. She had heard that this marriage was only happening because he asked his father for it, but now he's suddenly canceling without hesitation, which leaves her perplexed. Dimitry simply asks her if she really wants to marry him, and when she replies no, he tells her that in that case, they no longer need to cause problems for each other, and he'll take care of everything. He reassures her that she doesn't need to worry because he will take full responsibility. Since he's already called the idiot of the Dimitry family, he doesn't mind being called the divorced one as well. She can understand why he seems so determined. Is this really the same idiot everyone talks about? The door then closes behind him, and from inside, she hears a heated argument. Someone yells, asking what's the meaning of canceling this marriage. However, Dimitry calmly informs his father that he's just letting him know because he's already told the girl. His father calls him an idiot, pointing out that everyone already calls him the fool of the Dimitry family, and what he was trying to do was secure a good relationship for the boy. It was the only thing he needed to do, as it would guarantee noble status for their family. All Dimitry had to do was marry a beautiful girl whom he himself had begged for. Dimitry apologizes, but his father grabs something from the table and throws it at his head, demanding to know if he thinks an apology will fix this. They've been planning to do something about sending him to the battlefield for the next 6 months, but now that seems inevitable. and he asks if Dimitry has anything to say. Dimitry simply replies that he has nothing to add. His father then mentions that he heard Dimitry got involved with the Blood Fangs and even punished them, but he doesn't believe it. He should know that even he can't go against that group, so now Dimitry will have to deal with his own problems. His father won't help him at all. Watching the boy remain silent, his father expects him to kneel and start crying, but Dimitry just responds that he understands and will handle everything on his own. Confused, his father stands up and asks what he means, but Dimitry simply says that the problem was caused by his actions, so he will resolve it and only return once everything is fixed. With that, he closes the door and begins to clean his face. Someone nearby asks if he's going crazy. Dimitry turns to see Flora and questions why she's still there. She tries to warn him that he's going against the Blood Fangs. Know ye and fear nobles. If they see him as a threat, they'll probably kill him. She advises him to return to his father, beg for forgiveness, and give up on this. But Dimitry only asks why he would do such a thing. She explains the reasons, but Dimitry interrupts her, stating that it seems she really doesn't know her place. The scene shifts to a few hours earlier when Hans was dousing Dimitry with perfume and trying to mask the smell of blood, and Dimitry was eager to take off the tight-fitting clothes. However, the servant explained that this was the only way to show respect. But Dimitry was thinking about this marriage. He's still adjusting to this world, and this would only complicate his understanding. The servant suggested they go downstairs to handle the situation. Dimitry thought that since the girl had never done anything against him, he had no reason to disrespect her, which is why he intended to end things with as little offense as possible. But now he realizes that the girl never planned to show him any respect in the first place, which gives him no reason to do so either. He then tells her that from his perspective, she seems very arrogant. However, it's ridiculous for her to show concern now when she didn't consider any circumstances while trying to break off the marriage. But when he told his father that he would take full responsibility, that's when she got anxious. He accuses her of wanting to appear like a good person after putting him in this situation. But she needs to understand that at no point did she interfere with his decision. They will now go their separate ways and each will take care of their own lives. He told his father that he would take full responsibility to prevent people from thinking that this was a consequence of the end of their relationship and because he wanted no further involvement with her. This was the first and last time they would see each other. Later that same night, Selma tells another to stop drinking. It's Lehana, Dimitri's mother. His father confesses that today, unfortunately, he used violence against Roman again. This is because after becoming nobles, he never wanted his son to go through that situation again. Lehana tries to reassure him, saying it's all right and that their children have grown up healthy. The father acknowledges this, but admits that he still doesn't understand why the boy is like this, especially since Roman was the only one who went through hard times with him. He's at a loss for how to handle Roman. Lehana tells him it's okay. They may have made mistakes as parents, but that's part of life. Yet, even so, they are still the only ones who can correct the boy's wrong behavior. Lehana expresses confidence that the Romeros she once knew will help their son get back on the right path. Her husband asks if she's referring to the issue with the Blood Fangs. She nods, saying she surely spoke out of anger, but since he can be a bit headstrong, it might be wise to talk to Captain Jonathan to help the boy out. He then calls for the servant and instructs him to summon Captain Jonathan. The next morning, Roman is walking through the town and Hans is trying to stop him, warning him that the Blood Fangs will likely try to take revenge for what happened yesterday. But Roman simply asks why Hans thinks these men became so powerful. Hans admits he has no idea. Roman explains that in war, fame is what generates fear. Because the Blood Fangs are ruthless, that fear has made them more efficient at completing their missions. Hans then asks if Roman is saying they are dangerous or that they are weak. Roman responds that they are only as weak as the amount of fear they can instill in him. The scene shifts to a restaurant where someone delivers a feast they had ordered. Hans is delighted, saying the food looks delicious. However, Roman stands up and says he's going out, but instructs Hans to stay behind, telling him that he'll continue the investigation, but that it would be too dangerous for Hans to accompany him. Hans jumps up, desperately insisting that he cannot allow something like that. Even if it means putting himself in danger, he must remain by the young master's side. Roman pauses for a second, and then asks Hans if he really considers himself one of his men. Hans confirms, saying he will always follow the young master. Rhoda then tells him that he'll withdraw because he can't afford to lose someone as valuable as Hans in such a foolish way and reassures him that he'll be back soon. The poor Hans is left standing there, unsure of what to say but somewhat touched by the boy's words. As Hans runs off, he mutters that now is not the time to dwell on such things. He needs to inform others about this. Roman has realized over the past few days that the Blood Fangs aren't as strong as they seem. The problem is that because they operate in various small groups, it's difficult to eliminate the entire organization. They won't want to punish him publicly, and he can't locate them easily. But if that's the case, he just needs to make them come to him. That's why he deliberately walked through the city with Hans. Besides, today is Dimitri Knight's training day, so the streets aren't heavily patrolled. This means that if they plan to seek revenge, this is the perfect opportunity. At that moment, a few men call out to Roman Dimitry from behind, and one of them jumps forward, declaring that this is their revenge, and that he will pay the price for getting involved with the Blood Fangs. But then someone calls for the captain. A man with messy hair turns around. It's Hans, running towards Jonathan, calling out his name. Jonathan approaches the servant, asking why he's so frantic. Struggling to catch his breath, Hans tries to explain what's happening with Dimitry and urges Jonathan to find the boy immediately because he's in danger. However, Roman effortlessly dodges the first attack, lands an elbow in the attacker's stomach, making him drop his dagger, and then catches it midair with his other hand. Before the man can react, he's already been struck. Everything happened too fast, and the man retreated, unsure of what had just occurred. The other thugs, seeing their comrade fall, are equally confused. This Dimitry was entirely different from the one they heard about. Ronan simply asks what they're doing and invites everyone to come in at once. Back with the soldiers, Hans is frantically explaining the situation with the blood fangs. The soldiers exchange glances, saying it doesn't make any sense for Dimitry to be taking down the blood fangs. Hans insists that it's true, and that the boy has now gone up against all of them, making it very dangerous for them to just stand by. Jonathan recalls Romero mentioning all of this and asking for help. He just wants to know why Dimitry, who doesn't even know how to hold a sword properly, is getting involved in such matters. But he gathers everyone and tells them to grab their weapons, warning that they can't let anyone harm the young master. However, they'll be furious if the boy has actually caused trouble with the blood fangs. But the poor blood fangs were already on the ground. They attacked Dimitry, calling him a bastard, but he easily ducked under one swing and jabbed another in the stomach. Another bald man tried to come at him from the side, but Dimitry simply dodged and landed a kick to his belly. The fool collapsed, and Dimitry asked if it was just the three of them. The man tried to threaten him, saying he wouldn't get away with killing the two of them. But Roman just laughed, asking if he didn't realize that three of them would die. Roman then lightly stroked the man's thigh, telling him that it would be best to answer his questions, starting with who their leader was. A scene shifts to another part of town at the same bar from earlier. Suddenly, everyone inside is startled as Roman returns. The bald man at the counter turns to welcome him. He greets the young master, who responds with a cheery wave. The man wonders why Roman is acting so strange today and why he's even there. The bartender decided to ignore Roman's odd behavior and asked what he wanted to drink. Roman asked for a tear of the dawn. The bartender explained that they didn't serve such a drink there and asked if he wanted something else. Dimitry then requested the strongest drink they had because he had something to take care of in the morning. Earlier, someone had mentioned that everything was connected to the Dew of the Dawn at a bar in the middle of the city where they took on all their missions. All they needed to do was pass the special code. Roman asked what that code was, and the man had given him the exact code Dimitry had just used. At that moment, everyone fell silent. The bartender called out to the others in the bar, and just as he was about to give the order to attack, he was struck in the face. Everyone was shocked that the young man would do something like that in front of everyone, and they got up shouting to kill him. Meanwhile, a townsfolk fled the bar to call the guards, but it was a quick strike to the back of one's neck and a chokehold for the others. A bunch of men were on the ground, bewildered, wondering what had just happened. The so-called idiot of the Dimitry family had taken down 3 people before they could even register what was going on. In the world of Murin, the strongest aspect is that one can strengthen themselves with breathing techniques. In a short time, Baek had managed to improve Dimitri's body. Of course, he was far from what he used to be, but these men no longer posed any threat to him. A little later, the bartender began to get up, trying to understand what had happened. Ronan commented that he had gotten up just in time, as he was about to finish everything. The bartender, a chubby man, asked why Roman was attacking your establishment. Dimitry called him an idiot, pointing out that he knew the bartender had sent the men to attack him. However, there were some things he was very curious about, so they would need to have a little chat. Sometime later, Jonathan arrived at the scene and questioned whether this was really something the young master had done. At that moment, a soldier appeared on the second floor, informing Jonathan that it seemed the young master had gone to the Lord's estate. Jonathan was confused and wondered why. A soldier reported that it appeared the base of the blood fangs was located there. An hour earlier, Dimitry had told the bartender that it would be better if he confessed everything immediately. At this rate, he would be running out of fingers before he told the truth. The bald man warned that he had nothing to say to the boy, that Dimitry might kill him, but the blood fangs would take revenge. Roman then smiled, saying that now he liked the man's attitude. The people who resist the most before telling the truth are the ones he enjoys making tough the most. The old man commented that it was a waste and urged Roman to kill him already, but Roman responded that this was what they were there to find out. He then stated that it was time to resolve this and that he would need to test whether the man really wouldn't say anything. Roman held up a photo of the man with the boy beside him and asked what would happen if, by chance, he found the boy in the photo and killed him. The bald man claimed that wasn't his son, so it didn't matter. But Roman remarked that he was a terrible liar since the boy was the spitting image of his father. The man cursed at Roman, asking how a noble could dare use family as a threat. Roman replied that he had learned that the Blood Fangs members often sacrificed their lives for revenge because the group itself usually corrupted people by using their families. They used debts and threats to corrupt others as well, and Roman believed that the easiest way to make someone do what you want is to use their family. The bartender insisted that it didn't matter even if Roman knew the truth. The blood fangs would still kill him. Roman warned him to be more careful when deciding where to place his bets. He was serious when he said he would kill the man's son. It was a vow he would make in his name. But before sending the soldiers to hunt down the boy, he would give the man one last chance to tell the truth. Now he had to choose whether to bet on the blood fangs and watch his son suffer, or bet on Dimitry and let him take care of the men. But the choice was his. The scene shifted to a house in the middle of an alley. Someone asked if it was really true. The man confirmed that the entire division in the middle of the city had been wiped out by Roman alone, and if the knights got involved, he would truly be in danger. A grizzled old man with a resemblance to Wolverine remarked that he hadn't expected the boy to have such courage. But it didn't make sense for an entire division to be killed by a boy who had been rejected by the Swordsmanship Academy. The man asked where Roman was, and the other replied that he had just left the Dimitry region. He asked if the boy was alone, and the answer was yes. The man commented that it was good, as it seemed Roman intended to attack the entire place by himself. He then ordered everyone in the group to gather with the goal of killing Roman before they had to face the Dimitry Knights. After that, they would stretch the boy's body out in the town so that everyone would know what happens when you go against the blood fangs, thereby reviving their infamy. The scene then shifted to another castle. Someone asked what the Barco family was up to. It was a meeting of elders, and they were discussing how that family had borrowed a lot of money, which likely meant they were preparing for a war. And if that was the case, they would need to consolidate their forces before these men grew stronger. The blond man remarked that it seemed war would be inevitable, something he never expected to happen. A bespectacled man added that the central government also appeared to be supporting the Barcos. The old man in the red suit slammed his fist on the table, declaring that they couldn't afford to lose any territory since the Lawrence family relied entirely on fertile land. Another tried to argue that the documents proved past debts, but the man dismissed this as lies. Someone interrupted the discussion, telling everyone to be quiet. The blond man emphasized that they couldn't give up the territory, or they would lose the rest to all the other families. Since the Barcos wanted to oppose them, they would have to resist with all their might. That's why they had arranged the marriage with the Dimitry family. The men smiled, agreeing that the Dimitrys were indeed wealthy and that their weapons were top-notch. No matter how much money the Barcos borrowed, they would never have more wealth than the Dimitrys. The father reiterated that this was why he had pushed his daughter to marry that idiot, as he surely would refuse her. Another man reassured him that he couldn't blame himself as a father, as it was the best choice for everyone. Outside, someone had been eavesdropping Flora. Now she had no idea how she would break the news to her father. She couldn't imagine his reaction when he discovered she hadn't agreed to the marriage. But she also couldn't accept that her entire life would be sold to a man like that. The problem was that this wasn't just her father's plan, it was also the future of her family. But no matter what, she decided she would speak the truth. As she sealed herself to explain that she wouldn't marry someone she had no feelings for, a man arrived, urgently calling for the Lord. She turned confused. The man greeted Flora and then approached the door, calling for the Lord, shouting that it was an emergency. Flora was left utterly perplexed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone was pounding on a door, demanding that a bastard open it. It was Jonathan trying to enter the Lawrence territory, but the guard insisted that he follow the proper procedures. Jonathan warned that if Roman was harmed because of the delay, they would pay the price. At that moment, another man arrived at the gate, informing the captain that they were facing trouble. It seemed the Lawrence Square was also in chaos. Jonathan feared the worst and threatened to break down the door if they didn't open it. Back at the square, people were terrified by what was happening. Someone was hanging, and they were unsure whether they should intervene. It was the old Wolverine figure begging for someone to spare his life. They had been confident that defeating a single noble idiot would be simple. All they needed was anyone from the gang to handle it. But in reality, they had multiple armed men. He had been sure there was no way they could lose, or at least that's what he had believed. That is, until he saw everyone dead in front of him. Then he knew he was going to die too. He began to stumble over his words, pleading not to be killed, terrified of losing his life. Stuttering, he begged for mercy, grabbing Roman's leg and asking not to be killed. But Roman simply threw him into the middle of the city in front of everyone. The man pleaded, saying that if they spared him, he would serve as a dog for the rest of his life. Roman coldly responded that if he won offered to become a dog, he should have done so before showing his fangs. He then announced to the city that this man was the leader of the Blood Fangs, and everyone knew the kind of person he was. They had threatened the Dimitry family and used dirty tricks to deceive people. The crimes committed by this organization were clear, and Roman declared that he would destroy the entire organization along with the evil they had spread. As the crowd stood in shock, Jonathan approached the square, and the scene left him speechless. There was no need to describe what happened to the leader. The scene then shifted back to the earlier meeting where someone asked if it was true. A soldier confirmed that he had allowed Roman Dimitry to enter because he was the future husband of Miss Flora. However, half an hour later, Roman had appeared, dragging a man through the middle of the city, claiming he was the leader of the Blood Fangs, and executed him in front of everyone. The father was left speechless, and everyone else questioned whether this made any sense. The bespectacled man pointed out that killing and punishing someone without the Lord's permission was something that could be ignored. However, the Lord was not overly concerned with the series of problems that were emerging. He was more curious about the fact that the man who was to become his son-in-law had single-handedly wiped out the blood fangs. He had ordered that Roman Dimitry be summoned, as he wanted to speak with the boy himself. Sometime later, Roman was escorted in along with the man who had let him in and Jonathan. As a renowned knight, Flora's father immediately recognized Jonathan, which led him to believe that Roman had only managed to defeat the blood fangs with Jonathan's help. The eldest son of the Dimitry family then introduced himself. The father decided to ignore the explanations and directly asked why Roman had done something so violent. Roman explained that a few days ago, the blood fangs had committed a crime and beaten an innocent citizen. That's when he executed everyone in that very place. Outside, Flora was trying to eavesdrop on the meeting. She called the knight over and asked him to come closer. She questioned if he had really taken Roman Dimitry inside, and he confirmed it. She then asked why Roman had gone to her father's room. The knight hinted that she might be one of the last to find out, which understandably left her alarmed. Back in the meeting, Roman continued, explaining that was why he had to invade the Blood Fangs base and kill their leader. That was the summary of everything that had happened. However, the Lord pointed out that Roman didn't have the authority to execute someone on Lord's land. Roman acknowledged this, but doubted their ability to handle such men, given that the Blood Fangs were infamous in the region, abusing the local citizens, while nothing was done about it. That's why he took matters into his own hands, because he couldn't trust the Lawrence family to do it. The two servants on either side were shocked and drew their attention to Roman. But Roman expressed disappointment, saying he had expected to be called here for praise for doing the job they had ignored. He then asked the Baron if what he had done was truly wrong. The Baron asked the man beside him if he knew about Ben Miles. The man responded that they were aware he wasn't a good citizen, but they never imagined he was the leader of the Blood Fangs. At that moment, the Lord concluded that was enough, deciding there was no point in continuing the discussion, since it wouldn't have been a problem if the Lawrence family had taken care of the man themselves. He then said he would reward the boy and allowed him to leave. With that, Roman departed. The room fell silent, broken only by the Lord's laughter. The man beside him even wondered if the Lord had gone mad. The Lord seemed impressed, never having imagined that this was the true Roman Dimitry. The advisor attempted to argue that they couldn't leave such actions unpunished, but the father dismissed his concerns, saying that it was fine since Roman was going to be Flora's husband. He knew that only someone with such courage could achieve great things. The advisor tried to continue, but the father cut him off, saying he didn't want to hear any more and was pleased that the boy was perfect for his daughter. He then ordered Flora to be brought in so he could discuss everything with her. Meanwhile, on the way back to Dimitry territory, Jonathan remarked that Roman shouldn't have told the whole truth, because even though they had gotten rid of the Blood Fangs, the Lord seemed to have been left angered. But Roman simply replied that all that he did was show that the situation had escalated due to their negligence. And since the Lord still didn't know about the canceled marriage, he wouldn't punish his daughter's husband. Jonathan quickly realized that Roman had planned everything, leaving him puzzled as to who this person before him really was. It was clear he was no longer the Roman Dimitry he once knew. A voice echoed in Roman's mind, calling him by his true name, Baek Joong-Hyuk, and reminding him that, as the son of the celestial demon, he would have to prove he was qualified to succeed him. First, he would have to survive hunger, cold, and the hard ground. But his father had warned that if he died, it wouldn't matter since he could simply have another son. The only way to prove his worth was to rule over everyone. Of course, Baek had already been beaten down. A chubby kid laughed, saying he thought Baek would be stronger as the son of the celestial demon. But in the end, he was just an arrogant brat. Baek stood up only to be struck in the face again. The poor boy couldn't do anything. The other children, who stayed out of it, just thought he was an idiot. While most children were protected by their families during childhood, Baek had been forced to live in a world where only the strong survived. Back in Dimitry territory, Roman was now relaxing in a bathtub, enjoying a peaceful bath. He couldn't believe how exhausted his body had become from such a simple task. However, it was undeniable that since waking up in this world, he had experienced many things. To defeat the Blood Fangs, he had to kill everyone who stood in his way. Yet he had no regrets, as it proved that he hadn't changed as a person. If necessary, he would torture those who crossed him and eliminate anyone who sought to end his life. This was the life he had always lived, and nothing would change just because he had become Roman. The only problem was that it was becoming increasingly dangerous to go out as he had, and he didn't fully understand how this world operated. Not to mention, his true strength had diminished significantly, as he would need to think carefully about how to act in the future. Suddenly, someone called for the young master from the door, informing him that the Lord wished to speak with him. In the room, Romero asked if the boy had really done all that. Jonathan confirmed it, noting that Roman had changed a great deal. The father remained curious, but the knight insisted that this young master was not the same person they knew. Romero admitted that Roman had always been his greatest challenge. The only son with no notable characteristics, and the only one who had endured the hardships when they were poor. A long time ago, Roman had handed his father candy. When asked what it was, the boy had simply replied, "It's sweet." Romero was working in the mine when he saw his son approaching and asked why he had come to such a dangerous place. reminding him that it wasn't safe. But the boy just smiled and said that his father worked too much, so they brought him a sweet to give him energy to work faster and come home sooner. All Romero ever wanted was for his son to be happy. It's why he always favored him and gave him money so he wouldn't be called poor. He never imagined that this would lead Roman down the wrong path. Part of him had already given up on the boy, but hearing that he had taken down the blood fangs filled him with a renewed sense of hope. At the door, Roman asked to enter. Romero thought to himself that regardless of how Roman had achieved it, he had managed to eliminate the blood fangs. If that was the case, he was ready to do anything for his son. This would be his excuse for having failed as a father before. When Roman entered, Romero remarked that he had heard that Roman had taken down the blood fangs by himself. Baek, now inhabiting Roman's body, observed the boy's father. He could see that the man was anxious and full of hope for what he was about to say, but knew that if he told the truth, he would be seen in a completely different light. The problem was that accomplishments beyond expectations always came with a price. If he downplayed things now, he might buy himself more time to develop further. As his father continued calling out to him, Baek debated whether to tell the truth or lie. Hiding the truth seemed the more rational decision. Baek's thoughts flashed back to when he was being beaten as a child. The bully taunted him, asking if that was all he had. But then Baek grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed it into the bully's face without mercy. The boy was badly hurt, falling to the ground, and Baek stood up, picking up another rock to finish him off. From that day on, everyone was afraid of him. That was when he learned that in a lonely world, the most powerful always reigns. He declared to everyone that the boy he had killed was the former leader of their group, meaning that now he was in charge. Demonstrating superiority was the only way to ensure total victory. That's why Baek, now Roman, decided to say, "Yes, I was the one who took down the blood fangs." He and a celestial demon didn't know how to hide their superiority. Sometime later in the city's training grounds, the young trainees were practicing their swordsmanship when someone ordered them to stop and show respect to the lord who had arrived. Everyone immediately bowed, and a blond boy in the group looked surprised, wondering why Roman Dimitry was there. The trainer announced that they would be testing their swordsmanship against Mr. Roman and invited anyone who wanted to participate to step forward. Strangely, everyone was sweating, and no one wanted to volunteer. The blond boy couldn't understand why everyone seemed so afraid of Roman, or more accurately, why anyone would want to fight the idiot. An hour earlier, when Roman had confessed to his father that he was indeed the one who had taken down the blood fangs, his father asked how he had managed to defeat them. Needing to avoid raising suspicion, Roman explained that he had been secretly practicing swordsmanship. His father asked why he had kept it hidden, assuring him that he would have given him all the support he needed. Roman replied that he was tired of wasting his life and wanted to prove that even the idiot of the Dimitry family could accomplish something on his own. However, Romero found it hard to believe, saying it was impossible for someone to learn swordsmanship on their own to the point of killing those men. Roman explained that the blood fangs maintained their operations through threats, which was why he set a trap to lure out their leader. His father asked how he did it, and Roman explained that the blood fangs always retaliated against weaker nobles, so he used himself as bait. Romero said it was very risky because if they sought revenge, it would be easy for them. But Roman explained that most of the members were kept in line through threats, but he knew that if he could kill the leader, no one would want to save someone who would threaten them. Romero thought to himself that it was an extremely well thought out plan, and Roman had shown a lot of courage to follow through with it. Impressive would be an understatement for what he had done. To think that Roman was capable of such a thing. His father then asked if he could request a favor, and Roman agreed. Romero said he wanted to see the swordsmanship that Roman had been practicing with his own eyes to understand how much he had changed. Now back at the training grounds, Romero was startled by the fact that no one was volunteering. The blond boy thought that whoever hit Roman would be expelled, and whoever lost would also be expelled for being so bad, making no one want to participate. Meanwhile, Jonathan was thinking that they needed someone who could defeat Roman easily to demonstrate the knight's skills. He announced that if no one volunteered, he would choose someone himself. As the master, Jonathan couldn't participate, so there was only one other option. He called out the name Chris, telling the boy to step forward, which shocked him. Chris was the vice captain of the Dimitry Knights. The first time he had met Roman was the previous year, and they had gone to a bar where people were complaining about a drunk causing trouble. There, they found someone shouting and demanding to know if they were trying to make a fool of him. The boy had asked if they really wanted to shut down the place. The attendants apologized and didn't quite know what to do. However, it was the drunken Roman who said that trash like them shouldn't even speak, and he ordered the guy to come over to him once again. They tried to say something, but he threw the bottle against the wall. That's when Chris told the boy that enough was enough. But he just asked who they were. Chris reached out to grab his wrist to get him out of there, telling him he was embarrassing himself. But he received a slap in the face, and Roman asked how a lowly knight like him had the courage to lay his hands on him. Well, with just that slap, Chris already knew that this boy had never trained a day in his life. His strength was at best below the average of a man. He felt sorry for the Lord for having a son like that guy, and he was absolutely certain that this was trash, better off dead. So why were they telling him to have a duel with this Roman? He tried to tell the captain that he didn't think it was a good idea and that there might be other more suitable people for it. However, Jonathan warned that the boy had taken down the blood prisoners, so it had to be him. Chris was about to say something, but Jonathan just cut him off. So he said he understood. Everyone was eager to see the duel, and the two calmly observed each other. Jonathan told them to wait, but at that moment, Chris said he had a request. He warned that he had a vow to be merciless in a duel, regardless of who it was. If they accepted this request, he would then participate in it. He was certain that this idiot wasn't the person who had defeated the blood prisoners. Jonathan and Romero seemed to agree, and Roman, of course, smiled, which did not make Chris happy at all. Jonathan said that by the laugh the boy had accepted, and then he told both sides to get ready. While Chris was consumed by anger, Roman was just smirking. The second Jonathan gave the signal, Chris immediately launched himself, while the boy stood still, waiting for him. He quickly observed one of the movements, and Chris delivered a full strike that the boy defended against. The people who trained with Chris immediately realized that he was giving it his all. However, Jonathan was already impressed that the boy had actually blocked it. Chris retreated immediately. He could tell the boy's strength just by the way he defended himself. Not to mention that his stance still seemed completely stable. It wasn't exactly how he expected this duel to go, but he didn't care about that. He would only be satisfied when he crushed this guy. He tried another slash, but Roman simply sidestepped. However, Chris saw this movement. He spun his body to hit him from the side, but the boy defended again. Roman seemed calm, observing the attacks. When Chris found an opening in his back, for him the match was won now. It was just a matter of landing this blow, and it would be over. But Roman simply crouched. He saw an opening, and at that moment, Chris knew he was going to get hit. The attack brushed past his face, and the guy even got a new haircut. Terrified, he retreated. He realized how dangerous that had been, while the Lord and the captain couldn't believe it. For the people who trained with Chris, it made no sense that he was losing, and he himself wondered if this was really the skills of Roman Dimitry that he knew. From defense to evasion or attack, nothing was lacking. Could it be that he had really defeated the blood prisoners? Because if so, at this pace. At that moment, he said he was overthinking, and Roman was still the same idiot as before. But that's when Roman said that was enough warming up. And he said that this time he would go first. And the poor guy hadn't even reacted yet. Too late when he realized it. He managed to defend himself the last second by sheer luck, while he couldn't believe that the boy was that fast. He made a move backward, but Roman kept closing in. All Chris could do was defend bit by bit, and the people around were scared by the sequence of attacks. Chris was having to give it his all just to manage to defend himself. He had to at least find an opportunity to end this, but then he took a hit to the arm that knocked him sideways. He realized he needed to step back, but that's when he noticed Roman was coming at him with an overhead attack. The movement seemed long and slow, and the middle of his chest seemed like the perfect opening, and he didn't hesitate to strike with full force. But it was just a trap from Roman, who easily dodged. He gave a little smile, and at that moment, Chris realized he had fallen into a trap. He knew there was no way he could win at this rate, and the worst part was losing to Roman. That's when he gripped his sword, and an aura emerged from it. Jonathan shouted and told him to stop that. But Chris had already activated the one-star aura. Of course, even Baek was surprised by that, and the arena exploded. The people around couldn't see anything. Romero was worried about what might have happened to Roman. He let out a sigh of relief, realizing that Roman had narrowly avoided getting hit by that aura-infused sword. Chris, surrendered after accidentally using the aura, was promptly struck on the chin for his troubles. Naturally, neither Jonathan nor Romero expected Roman to win, but there was Chris, lying on the ground. Everyone always asked who this new young prodigy of the captain was. The others would respond that he was one of the best they had ever seen. Despite being so young, he was already a 2-star knight. Rumors circulated that he had started sensing mana after just 6 months of training and had reached 1 star in less than 3 years. Moreover, his swordsmanship was said to be incredible. The women were all curious, wanting to know the boy's name. After practice, Jonathan would often say that was enough for the day, but Chris would get up and ask to practice just one more time. That kind of determination excited Jonathan because the boy not only had talent, but also worked hard. To him, Chris was a genius. But there was his genius now being thoroughly beaten by Roman, who cruelly watched him lie on the ground. While Chris lay unconscious, Romero called out to Jonathan, asking what happened as he had heard that Chris was a 2-star knight. The problem was that not even Jonathan could grasp how strong Roman had become. What Roman had displayed was the skill of someone who should have had years of training. Considering that just a month ago he had been doing nothing but complaining, it seemed impossible that he had changed so much. But nothing made sense, so Jonathan simply told Romero that Roman was a genius in swordsmanship. Roman, meanwhile, was just laughing as he looked at Chris, who was still unconscious. He was impressed by how aggressive and focused Chris was. With the skill he had shown, Chris could easily have taken down the blood Fangs as well. It was easy to see why Jonathan was proud to have him as a protege, but to the celestial demon, Chris was one of the weakest. Even the weakest warriors of the celestial demon sect were stronger than this. However, that strange power Chris had displayed at the end had really caught his attention. As another joker started to emerge, Romero began laughing like a madman. Once again, everyone was confused. But of course, Romero said it was great to see this. To him, it was incredible to have a son who was a genius in swordsmanship. He asked Jonathan if he was sure. Jonathan replied that it was impossible for someone to have evolved so much without being a genius. Naturally, the father was all smiles. He called Roman over, telling him to come closer. Romero said it had been a long time since he had been this happy and that he wanted to applaud his son. To him, Roman deserved whatever he wanted, so she asked for anything. Roman smiled and mentioned the war that was going to happen in 6 months. His father was already certain that Roman would ask not to go and ask where it was. However, Roman's request was the right to choose whoever he wanted to go with him. Romero was confused and even a bit stunned. He tried to suggest that Roman could return to Flora and back out of this, but Roman simply said that he wanted to go. This surprised his father, but then said he understood. Roman would have the right to take whoever he wanted to that war and anything related to it. Roman then said he had one more request, and his father told him that as long as he acted properly, he could ask for anything. Roman made his second request while looking at Chris, who was still unconscious. When Chris awoke, he asked why he had to teach Roman about aura. Jonathan simply replied that it was the master's order. However, Chris protested, saying this was too much. He didn't even know Roman, and after having been in a coma for so long, it was embarrassing. Now, on top of everything, he had to teach aura to this guy. He said he would rather have his head cut off. Jonathan interrupted and made a proposal. If Chris could use the opportunity of teaching Roman to learn why Roman had changed so much, he would gain the right to learn any technique Jonathan had been hiding from him. Immediately, Chris got up excited, asking if it was true, and Jonathan confirmed it. Now Chris was eager, because he was certain this would be easy, and he would definitely receive the secret to becoming the 3-star knight. Of course, he didn't want to seem too enthusiastic, but he told Jonathan to keep his word. Inside the castle, someone called out to Roman, saying they had heard about the incredible duel he had today. It was Hans who remarked how amazing it was that Roman had defeated a 2-star knight. Roman asked if he knew what this 2-star aura business was. Hans admitted he didn't know much, but said it was related to the ability to use mana. Our protagonist then mused that it seemed to be called mana in this place. He was sure the power Chris had used was a key explosion, but the way they utilized it was completely different from how it was used in the mirroring world. Here, it was called aura, and one detail he had noticed was that it was a total waste. Even though he didn't understand why they used ki in this way, he knew he needed to learn more about this power and how people utilized it. But during tomorrow's training, he was confident he would get the answers he needed. The next morning, Roman stood face to face with Chris, who was clearly not happy. However, Roman wasn't much different, until the boy let out a little chuckle, which immediately made Chris angry. He tried to calm himself down and said he would explain what aura was. He explained that aura was nothing more than the use of mana from a knight's perspective. Mages also use mana, but they create circles and spells to do so, while knights use it around their bodies. The first person to explore the use of mana was Emperor Alexander. He was the first to discover that it was possible to use mana to strengthen the body, and aura was the ability to release it instantly. This allowed someone to use much more strength than normal. However, Chris mentioned that the history wasn't very important since only a few people could use mana. 1 in 1,000 could become a knight, and 1 in 10,000 could become a mage. That's why discovering whether you have the affinity is the most important thing, as the minimum talent required to become a knight with aura is the ability to at least sense mana. He said that it took him half a year, but achieving it in a year was above average. Roman acknowledged this and asked Chris to explain how to sense his mana. Chris agreed while thinking that Roman was full of himself after winning that fight. However, it was a shame, as talent in swordsmanship and in mana were two completely different things. Now Roman would experience the harsh reality through this training, but the premise of this training was flawed from the start. Roman had already sensed the mana of this world, and using the techniques he learned as the celestial demon, he was storing part of it in the center of his body. He was only here to understand why they did things this way, even if it wasn't the right way. He wanted to comprehend why they did things this way. Chris started walking around and told Roman to feel everything that came into contact with his body. Once he got used to sensing the mana, he could start thinking about trying to manifest it. When he succeeded in manifesting it, he would become a 1-star knight. However, there were various ways to manifest aura. It could be applied to a sword or, for example, cover the body. He was about to continue his explanation when he noticed something. Roman was already standing beside him with his mana activated. Poor Chris didn't even know what to say. The boy was actually manifesting aura, but Roman could only think that he knew very well that the way people use ki in this world was garbage. In his world, you purify the energy and concentrate it within your body, whereas in this world, they simply expect mana to naturally accumulate in their bodies. In the mirroring world, mana is scarce and dense, meaning it's difficult to accumulate, but also doesn't move much. Here, however, mana is abundant but extremely light, causing it to escape the body as easily as it enters. The two methods weren't even comparable, since in Mirim you usually strengthen both the exterior and interior of your body. In this world, the exterior isn't strengthened and mana isn't accumulated. Not to mention that spreading energy everywhere is completely inefficient. If Roman used such a method, he wouldn't reach the top 10 even in 100 years. Shocked, Chris asked how Roman had done it. Roman replied that Chris probably already knew the answer. Chris insisted that this was exactly why he was asking, since it took him at least half a year. He demanded Roman tell the truth, accusing him of pretending not to know how to use mana just to show off now. It was starting to make sense why Chris had lost. Roman commented on Chris' assumption that he was hiding his powers, saying that Chris was just assuming what he wanted. But poor Chris was struggling to understand what was happening. No, it took him 10 years to reach 2 stars. Suddenly, Roman started laughing and Chris asked what was so funny. Roman just remarked that Chris was amusing. Chris, now more upset, asked if Roman was saying that his efforts were funny. Roman then asked if, in all those 10 years of climbing the ranks, Chris had ever once questioned the methods he was being taught. Chris was about to respond, but Roman cut him off, saying that ordinary people are like that. They assume that what has been passed down through countless generations is always correct. When he was learning aura, he wondered why people were so fixated on this method when it clearly had flaws. Was it because they didn't know any better? Or was their faith in Captain Jonathan too strong? But the truth is, people follow it because it's the easiest thing to do. Roman continued, saying he wouldn't deny that Chris had worked hard for 10 years, but he found it really funny that Chris had never questioned the purpose of what he was doing. Roman then walked away, saying that nothing in this world reaches a perfect state. Even things he once held as certainties were different in the past and changed over time. Roman knew that questioning oneself like this leads to suffering, especially when, after countless attempts, you end up failing. That's where you have to go against everyone's criticism and your own despair. However, even if that's the case, change is necessary. That's how Roman ignored his father's teachings and created his own art. He then told Chris that they would end the training there. At that moment, Chris called out to Roman and asked him what he should do from now on. The scene shifted to a flashback. A man asked a boy if he was going to continue suffering, or if he would admit defeat. From now on, the blood demon sect would follow Baek. The only thing the man wanted to know was how he could become as strong as Baek. He was determined to dedicate his body and soul to him as long as they both became stronger. But he needed to know what he should do from now on. Roman recognized this as someone who had let go of their pride and said that it was interesting. The blood demon was someone so powerful that he unified all the sects. As someone who dominated the marine world, it was inevitable that he would eventually face Baek. And in the end, after a long battle, he was defeated. Roman remembered that the child from the past had swallowed his pride and asked for guidance. The desire to become stronger at the cost of one's pride reminded him of the blood demon. He told Chris that he was asking about ways to become stronger, but unfortunately, he didn't know what to say to that. Confused, Chris asked what he should do then. Roman replied that he had already given the answer. The only thing he couldn't do was blindly follow what he had been taught. If Roman taught him anything, Chris would be following another lesson blindly. So what Chris needed to do was seek the answer on his own. The only hint Roman gave was to stay by his side from now on. In 6 months, Roman would go to the battlefield, where Chris would see him defeating countless enemies and becoming stronger. And if in 10 years, Chris was still by Roman's side, Roman was sure that by then, Chris would have found the answer. That same night, Chris lay isolated in bed. He recalled everyone saying that the right thing to do was to train until he began to feel human. He remembered the teachings passed down to him by Jonathan, even the time when he was told he had become a 2-star knight. But Roman's laughter, mocking him for never questioning, filled him with anger. Someone asked what this was all about. Jonathan wanted to know if Chris was sure, as Chris had just said that he would go to the battlefield in 6 months with Roman. Jonathan asked if something had happened, and Chris confirmed that something had. They locked eyes for a moment, and the captain admitted that it seemed Chris had a reason for doing this. From now on, Chris would no longer be part of the Dimitry Knights. No matter what happened, Jonathan hoped that Chris could protect Roman on the battlefield. Chris simply thanked him. But at that moment, Jonathan realized that Chris was no longer the little boy he had found on the battlefield, desperately clinging to a dead woman. Jonathan said that if the Chris he knew really wanted to follow Roman, that it seemed that Roman was no longer an idiot. He told Chris to follow him, as from now on he would be prepared. If Chris wanted to survive on the battlefield, he would need a secret weapon that he could call his own. Now the knight was excited. The scene shifted to the city, where everyone was talking about a certain rumor that the idiot of the Dimitry family had wiped out all the blood Fangs. Kevin, from the beginning of the story, was there listening to people saying that Roman had really kept his word. He believed it might be true, as he had seen Roman take down 3 men with just a stick in his hand. But could it really be that Roman did this because he had kept his word? Kevin concluded that no, Roman wouldn't go that far just for someone like him. At that moment, his boss asked why he was standing there thinking and told him to get back to work. Kevin thought about how all he wanted was to be strong enough to protect his family. He knew that there were still dozens of people like the blood Fangs in the world. But as a peasant, how could he become stronger? Training wasn't an option. He wouldn't even get a chance. Just then, someone called out to him, causing the crate he was holding to fall to the ground. It was Roman, who said that it had been a while since they last saw each other. Kevin asked what Roman was doing there, but then quickly corrected himself and threw himself to the ground, thanking Roman for saving his family. Roman asked if things had improved, and Kevin confirmed that they had. The blood Fangs were no longer pursuing them, and he had even found a job. The only thing Kevin didn't know was how to express his gratitude. Ronan told him not to worry because there would be opportunity as soon as Kevin heard his proposal. His family would never have to worry about money again. Additionally, they would have a house and good food. They wouldn't need to work in exhausting places anymore. Kevin's entire family could be blessed with this new life, but the price was that Kevin would have to swear loyalty and live for Roman. Kevin was silent for a moment before he bowed his head to the ground, saying he would live for Roman. He would die if Roman asked and kill if Roman commanded. If Roman promised to take care of his family, that would be more than enough. Roman saw that Kevin was the kind of person who showed loyalty with his own blood. In his past life, the Mad Demon was someone who could wipe out entire clans with just one word. Maybe that's why, as soon as he thought of summoning someone, Kevin's name came to mind. It was truly worth it to see the boy again, and Roman said that from this point forward, Kevin was his. Back at the Dimitry castle, Roman handed Kevin over hands and asked him to help the boy adjust. Roman mentioned that he would return later, and Kevin expressed his gratitude for everything. With that, they left, and Roman headed to the library. Roman began studying the path of the Aura Knights. The first stage was the manifestation, which qualified someone as a 1-star knight. To reach 2 stars, one would need to cut through steel with their aura. At 3 stars, one transcended logical comprehension and was treated as someone special in any kingdom. On the Salamander continent, there were a few 6-star knights, but no one had ever heard of someone reaching the 7th rank. Even among the 10 strongest in the world, not all were 6-star knights. Roman mused that given Chris's strength, Jonathan must be a 3-star knight, and that 6 stars in this world were practically incomprehensible. The aura of someone like that could reach 12 meters in height and impact the entire world. Currently, there were only 12 6-star knights in the entire world. Roman realized that these individuals were indeed powerful, especially if they could achieve such feats in an inefficient way. On the other hand, there were the so-called archmages, a title given to a sorcerer who reached 7 circles. In this world, they were considered half-god, half-human, as they could bring destruction wherever they went. A single spell from someone like that could split the sky in 2. Unfortunately, magic was something that didn't exist in the Mirror world, and now he at least had some idea about it. As unlikely as it was, he knew he couldn't afford to make an enemy of someone like that for the time being. The fact that he couldn't predict anything about them made everything more dangerous. But Roman wasn't someone who could live in a bubble. He enjoyed experiencing everything and reading overall. This would indeed be interesting. Now it was time to truly begin. The scene shifted to Hans opening a room. Roman asked what it was for. The servant explained that it was the old forge, and no one had access to that place anymore. Roman remarked that it was the perfect place to train. He told Hans that he would be staying there for the next week and that no one should enter or bring him food. Roman made Hans swear that unless his people were in grave danger, he wouldn't let anyone inside. Hesitantly, Hans agreed. With that, Roman was left alone. He noticed that the room was filled with straw because Hans had put it there to make things more comfortable. Roman appreciated the gesture but preferred to do without it. All these days, he had been accumulating energy in the center of his body, but it was time to start developing the techniques he used in his past life. He activated the first stage of the celestial demon's art. First, he would circulate all the energy to remove impurities from his body. The cultivation process was aggressive, with blood pouring out everywhere. Ronan knew this would happen, which is why he had accumulated the right amount of energy. He didn't have time to waste and needed to regain his past strength as quickly as possible. The first stage of this technique was called the human stage, and it was the first step toward his goal. The scene then shifted to a week later. The bald man offered to bring tea and drinks for Count Lawrence and Miss Flora. The Lawrence entered and asked where Roman was. The bald man explained that Roman was currently handling some business and unclosed the door, leaving them inside. Lawrence remarked that it was clear they weren't welcome there. He told his daughter they would have to wait and instructed her to sit down. He then called her by name and explained that he had arranged this meeting to reverse the mistake she had made. Flora replied that she understood perfectly. Back in the moment when he had shouted upon discovering that she had broken off the engagement, Flora explained that she had already discussed her situation with Roman and even tried to follow her father's advice. But he interrupted her, calling her by name and reminding her that he had always believed she was an intelligent child, so he hadn't expected her to do something like this. She needed to understand that the Barco family had borrowed a large sum of money from the bank, which meant that a war would soon begin. The marriage with the Dimitry family wasn't just a decision. It was inevitable because they were the only family capable of standing against the Barcos in this region. Flora argued that the Lawrence family wasn't weak and questioned why they thought they couldn't win without the Dimitrys. Her father explained that the government had approved all the documents without even checking anything. If the bank itself had lent so much money, it showed that this matter had already escalated beyond these families. This battle was designed for them to lose, and they would use that defeat to take everything they had. He would lose the land, the honor, and even her, what was known as the flower of the Lawrence family. In the present, Flora reflected that she knew all of this. She understood the decisions and why her father had made them, yet she had ignored it all for selfish reasons. She needed to wake up to reality since she couldn't live like a flower forever. Meanwhile, Reza was wandering around, wondering what he should do. As soon as Roman appeared, he would have to tell him that Flora had been waiting for him since the morning. The problem was that it was already late afternoon, but at the same time, Roman had also told him not to disturb him. Finally, the door opened. Renzo, all radiant, called out for the young master, but he was in for a shock. However, the scene shifts back to Lawrence. He already expected this treatment because of Flora's mistake. He knows that the Lawrences need this political marriage. But even so, this didn't sit right with him. Suddenly, he stands up and Flora calls out to him. He announces that he's going to sort this out and find Baron Dimitry on his own. Someone calmly takes a few notes. Then suddenly, Lawrence opens the door and asks why he's making a visit and waiting so long. If he's dissatisfied, he could have just said so. He never expected the Dimitrys to be so petty. However, Romero is just standing there observing. He says he understands what he said, but asks if today's meeting was scheduled in advance. The Baron mentions that he understands that he showed up unannounced, but it's been a week since he'd been asking to speak with Roman. If, at least, they had refused from the start, they wouldn't have been offended. However, Romero asks why he would refuse a visit from the Lawrences. But now he wants to know if that's all he has to say, and if really he barged into this room to complain about being tired and waiting until noon. On the day Flora visited, Roman himself said he wanted to end that marriage. Even though he argued with the boys, he's sure Flora didn't want that marriage either. Even if it was a disgrace to the Dimitrys, he decided to say nothing but stay quiet like a fool. After all, it was she who came there just to say it wouldn't work out. He didn't know at the beginning of it all, it was the Lawrences who were pushing for it to happen. And now he's there, barging into the room and complaining just because he had to wait for a while. Even worse, for a meeting that wasn't even scheduled. And he has the nerve to complain as if it's his fault. He then reveals that not long ago he received a message from the Barkovs. It was an offer for a political marriage where they would gain connections with the central government and a piece of the Lawrences' land. Even so, he decided to refuse that offer and asks him why he thinks he did that. Lawrence, who also questions this, wonders because to him, it would obviously be more advantageous to ally with the Barkovs. Roman says the reason is simple. The Dimitrys have enough power for him to choose whatever path he wants. And since his eldest son liked the young lady from the Lawrence family, that was the reason he opposed the Barkovs. At that moment, Lawrence realizes he messed up because of his foolish ego. The father says he understands his son's reputation for being an idiot, and that the fame of the two doesn't match. But even so, he needs to keep in mind what kind of family they are. Rhoda's name completely changes the moment the Dimitry family is associated with him, and that's why those who should be desperate for this marriage aren't them, but in fact the Lord's family. Or perhaps did he misunderstand something? Suddenly, Flora remembered the days she used to go to the academy when she was younger. That was the place where many children from renowned families went to build their knowledge as nobles. However, there was one family from the north that had only one person there. The boy was so quiet that one could question if he really existed. That was the son of the Jolt family. In a place where the children believed they were treasures born into this world, he was distant. Until one day he made a small mistake. For the other children, that wouldn't mean anything, even if they made big mistakes. However, in his case, it resulted in a disciplinary committee. And on the day the teacher scolded him, the father approached and apologized. He begged for his son to be forgiven and said he would teach him better. At that moment, from a distance, she could only think of one thing. She felt sorry for him. However, right now, all of this seems funny to her. The Viscount apologizes and says he has nothing to say. Meanwhile, Flora realizes she had no right to feel sorry for that boy. And the Viscount says his daughter made a mistake out of immaturity. At that time, Joel was weak, and this is the same case for the Lawrences today. Once again, the father apologizes, saying that his entrance was disrespectful. And Flora understood that the weak had no choice but to bow to the strong. It was then as she began to lean forward to apologize to Romero. However, at that moment, someone entered. From the door, they announced that Master Roman had arrived, and Flora realized she had learned this lesson too late. Roman had dyed his hair white, and he was all dark now. He entered the room and announced that Roman Dimitry greeted his father. Everyone was confused, and the father asked if he had finished his training. He said yes, so he replied that they could discuss it later. He was called there to discuss the marriage with the Lawrences. All of this had started because of a decision he made, so he would respect any choice he made. Roman quickly understood what he was trying to say. He knew the significance of the alliance between those two families. At this moment, when the Lawrences are in danger, the wealth of the Dimitrys would serve as protection. The father asks if he requested this marriage even knowing that. Roman said that at the time he thought that was enough of a reason. However, everything changed when he met her for the first time, and she immediately talked about canceling the engagement. She had certainly heard the rumors and decided she wouldn't marry someone like him because of that. This means that all of her decisions were based on what others said. Regardless of how society judges them, he wants to be with someone who only believes in what they experience and see. And it's for this reason that he votes to end the engagement. At that moment, the room fell silent. Lawrence thought that now it was the end of everything, as this marriage was the last card they had. No other family would accept a political marriage in this situation. This means they would have to solve their problems with their own power. The problem is that if the Dimitrys and the Barkovs really combined forces, they wouldn't stand a chance. He needed to do something to at least prevent that. He then bowed and said that the Lawrences took full responsibility for this. As an apology, they would no longer collect any taxes from a Dimitry merchant passing through their territory. He knew this wasn't much for someone as wealthy as they were, but it was a way to show they were sorry. Romero said he couldn't accept that, as the Dimitrys couldn't profit from his son's future. All they would need to do was announce that it was Flora who canceled, and they wouldn't join forces with the Barcos. Lawrence simply thanked him. Of all his fears, this was the greatest. And with that, they left the room.